You're listening to the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where we talk about all things bookish and wonderful. You can find the notes for this episode and all of the others at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where we talk to bloggers, authors, and bookworms all about anything to do with books. On today's episode, I talk with Daniel Ingram-Brown, who is the author of a series of adventure books called the Firebird Chronicles. The first book in the series, The Rise of the Shadow Stealers, has been adapted into a stage production, which is currently on tour between the 22nd of October and the 4th of November. Now, I'm not sure when this episode will be going out, it might be done by then, but it's still so cool that it's going on tour. The third book in the series, which is called Through the Uncrossable Boundary, comes out on the 30th of November, and there's a book launch soon. If you're kind of up north in the UK, then it'll be quite local to you, and there will be a link in the notes to book your ticket for the launch. So if you fancy just going to a really fun event, then go and have a look at the tickets. I wish I could go, but I'm a bit too far away. I read a super advanced copy of Through the Uncrossable Boundary ages and ages ago now, and I loved it. And it's a perfect ending to the whole series, and it's definitely been worth the wait. So if you've read any of the books in the series, then I definitely recommend you reading the third one. Or if you haven't read any of them, then please do. I'll put a link to some of the books in the show notes, which you can see at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. So in this episode, we talk about the process of adapting a book for the stage, which is a little bit different to what we usually talk about, where we talk about film and TV. It's really interesting to hear the process of adapting a book for the stage instead. We also talk about the release of the third Firebird Chronicles book and what Dan's typical day looks like as an incredibly busy person. So without further ado, here is Daniel Ingram-Brown.
It's wonderfully bookish, whoa, all things books, let's start the show. Everything from classics to contemporary, come and chat about books with me. If you're a reader of YA, grab a cuppa and just press play.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
We spoke ages and ages ago.
We did.
And it feels like it's been about 10 years since we last spoke.
I know, it has. It's been ages. I don't know how long it was. It's like somewhere between a year and 2 years, my guess is.
Yeah.
But yeah, ages ago.
I know.
And this year's been so busy. It's been crazy. I've had loads on.
Yeah, I've been kind of keeping up with your Twitter and Instagram and things, and it seems like you've just been endlessly busy.
I've had all sorts. I'm an author in residence in a school in Bradford. So I've sort of been doing that and producing anthologies with the kids there. I've been doing the MA, so my master's. So that's been really good. And then I've been getting ready to launch my new book and the show of my first book. So loads happening.
Yeah. So when we last spoke, I think you were still in the really, really early stages of still writing the scripts and kind of working with people to get the scripts prepared. Yeah. And now it's on tour, which is crazy. Like, that shows how long it's been since we last spoke.
I know.
That it's gone from some words on a page to an actual tour.
I know. Our first show was this morning. So literally
cool.
we have just started. We did a school, we had a school show this morning.
How did that go?
Yeah, really good. The kids seem to love it, which is, excellent.
Good.
Yeah, it's a nice show. It's quite long, and there's a little interval, so they go off and have playtime in the middle, and then come back to watch the second half. But each half is about 40 minutes long. So yeah, it's a good show. There's some really fun bits. The second half particularly, there's lots of energy too. So it's nice because it ends on a real high. Yeah, so good. We've got another school tomorrow morning, and then we're doing some library shows and a couple of sort of community venues.
Yeah, that's cool.
So all over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. Is it difficult to turn a book that you've written into a stage production, like especially where yours is so full of kind of weird and wacky characters?
Yeah.
Is it difficult to, like, how do you turn just kind of words on a page into an actual play?
Yeah, I think it helped. So I didn't actually write the stage version of this.
Right.
We got a writer in. So I run a little, my little theatre company is called Suitcase and Spectacles. And my background is in theatre and performance. So I've been doing this for sort of years. But for this show, because we were working with the book, we decided to get someone in so that they could look at it from the outside a little bit and write the script for it. So that was quite helpful because we then had conversations about what was the main thread of the story, what was the thing we were really going to focus on. One of the things when you're putting a play on rather than a book is you haven't got as much time, so there are bits you have to cut, and you have to make choices to cut characters and to cut story elements. So it was quite helpful to have someone there to do that with, and he came with ideas, and then I sort of said, I think maybe we should get rid of this bit. So there's a whole bit a reveal at the end of the book, which isn't in the play. There's a sort of whole other level in the book, which we couldn't put in the play. So that's been quite interesting. And it's quite an epic story. So the characters travel to all sorts of different places. They live on this sort of mystical island with a village that has all sorts of different shops, but they're not ordinary shops. It's like a Mr. Snooze's bedtime story slumber shop where you go to find out about dreams. Or you've got a character called Isaiah Scriven who looks after all of the island's secrets and has them in caskets. So it's sort of that sort of epic fantasy type story. So it was a challenge putting it on stage and sort of getting all of those different places and taking the audience on that journey.
I remember reading the first one and like some of the scenes and the characters and things in it, like where they're kind of exploring all these really crazy places.
Yeah.
Because by that point I already spoke to you and I knew that you were turning it into a stage production. Yeah. And I just kind of read it like, how on earth is this going to translate to a stage show?
Yeah, it's and just with 3 actors. So it's just 3 actors. 2 of them play the sort of main characters, Fletcher and Scoop, who are apprentice adventurers who go to this school which trains story characters to be in their stories. It's called Blotting's Academy. So they're sort of getting to grips with what it means to be a story character. They've when they wake up there, they don't have any memory, so they've lost their beginnings, and the story is about them sort of discovering who they are. So they go to all these strange places, but only 3 people. So then we've got one character who plays one actor who plays a character called the storyteller, and the storyteller sort of is the character who breathes this world into existence. They're like
I remember really liking the idea of his character in the books. Like it was just a really cool concept.
He's fun, but he's quite good on stage because he can narrate stuff and he can also become other characters. So he sort of plays all the other characters that aren't Fletcher and Scoop, and he has you see him sort of change into the different costumes on stage, and it's sort of the idea that the storyteller becomes these different characters. And then our only other 2 characters in the play are the 2 baddies, Griselda and Knot, and we do those with puppets. So we've got these big full body puppets, and the 2 actors who play Fletcher and Scoop also operate the puppets for Knot and Griselda. So that they have to work really hard because they like run off stage as Fletcher and Scoop, and then they put these puppets on and they come straight back on and
exhausting.
Do a scene as Knot and Griselda, and then they have to get rid and come back as Fletcher and Scoop. Yeah, I think it is quite exhausting for them. They're definitely tired.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be fun though.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great fun. And we use like a soundscape. So we use a lot of sound to create the atmosphere of the different places on the island, like the story caves. And so that's been quite fun, putting all the sound together. And it's quite a sort of rich performance. There's music and lights and puppets and sort of mime, and so it's been challenging, but I think sometimes that's when you're most creative, is when there's that sort of challenge. How are we going to move
definitely.
from Wisdom's house into some caves, into a castle, onto the road, you have to be creative with it, and that's part of the fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask why, like, was it always going to be a theatre project? Like, did you kind of always envision it to be a theatre project? Because I know you've got your background in theatre. Was it kind of always, did you always imagine it as being theatre?
It's interesting because I didn't when I was writing the books, but actually the characters did start off as little dramas that I did for some holiday clubs, like years ago.
Okay.
And that's where they first started. And we did these holiday clubs, and the characters would come on and sort of do 10 minutes, and then we'd sort of play games with the kids and sort of take them into that world. It was very different back then. And then I think I then used those characters in some audio stories. And then when I first decided to write a book, I decided to use the story from those audio stories as the sort of basis for the book. So it's sort of come full circle, because it's gone back to then being on stage, but having sort of changed lots on the way. Like the characters had different names and everything. But that's quite an interesting. So it's always had a bit of relationship between being a performance and drama, and then being in book form. But when I was writing the books, I didn't have in my head that they would definitely become a play. But I think because I do theatre stuff, that's just a natural thing to think. How do I extend that world, or sort of open it up to a different audience, and put it on stage is a good way of doing that.
Is it difficult to sit back and let other people kind of take charge of the story? Like where you said that somebody else wrote the scripts rather than you writing them. As the author, is it difficult to sit back and kind of accept that changes are going to happen to the story?
I don't know. I've actually quite enjoyed that. I quite enjoyed chatting to the guy called Paul Birch, who wrote the script. Like, it was really nice because he was thinking as a writer. So he read the book, and then we had conversations about what it was about, what the underlying themes were. And that was really good because we really dug into it. And then, I knew we'd have to make cuts. That's partly why I wanted it wanted there to be another writer involved, because I thought they might be able to have sort of fresh eyes on it, to be able to say, well, we don't maybe need this character for this bit, or we can skip this. No, I've quite enjoyed it because it gives you it helps you see the story in a fresh way. It helps me to learn about storytelling as well, and like how to really refine what the story is and how it works. And so I found that really interesting. I think maybe some authors would probably find that quite difficult, but I think because I
bet some kind of get too attached to the characters, and it's just kind of like, it's almost like giving them away to someone else.
I think because it's been a few years since I've written the first book, so I've had sort of 2 other books since then, and various other projects. So there's a little bit of distance from that first book, and to the extent sometimes when I like read a bit or I watch it on stage, it doesn't feel like mine. The story's sort of taken on a life of its own, and I have a bit of distance from it just because of time. So I think that's made it easier. Maybe if I was having to do that with something I was working on now, I'd find that harder, I think. But time helps you sort of have a different take on it. And it's nice to come back to it and find something fresh in it, something new.
Yeah, I bet it's quite cool as well to get other people's insights into it and to kind of see what ideas other people can bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're making a performance, obviously you've got the actors, so they're always bringing different ideas or questions. Why does this character do this at this time? What are they thinking? So I'm still, even though the book's written, I'm still discovering maybe bits about those characters because of the questions that I get asked during the process. Or even like a designer, the person who designed the set, they'll bring ideas about how the world looks or how it works, or and often people will come with questions that I've not thought about in terms of how that world works. So all of that helps you to sort of discover more about it, which for me is quite an exciting thing.
So going back to where I said you always look so incredibly busy.
Yes.
How do you manage to fit everything in? So like you've got the theatre directing, and then you've got actually writing as well. And then you've also got like all the workshops and the kids things that you do. Like how do you actually fit everything into your normal day?
It's a good question.
Do you still not know either?
No, there's some magic in there. I'm not sure. Well, sometimes it's just manic and very busy, and then other times actually there's quite a lot of space. So stuff like schools work tends to come at particular times. So around World Book Day, I'll be out going into lots of schools over a number of weeks, all different parts of the country. So I'm sort of focused on that. I think probably what I do is I tend to be focused on something for a chunk of time, and then I'll move to something else. So I won't try and do it all at once. If I'm doing schools work, that's sort of what I'll be focused on. Or if I'm directing the play, I'm focused on that. And then I'll have times when I schedule in writing time, so I'll go away for a few days and I'll be writing, or I'll have a few months where writing is the focus. So I think obviously I'm always having to juggle. There's always bits of admin and stuff like that. But hopefully with what I do, the different things feed each other. So if I'm going into schools, I'm meeting my readers, I'm hearing their reaction, like I'm reading bits of the book, I'm getting their reactions. That's quite inspiring then for writing. That sort of feeds you for writing. And then, like you say, working with the actors, that's giving me fresh insight into the story. So I think you just have to make sure each of those things sort of feeds you in some way and gives you an energy for the other things. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're just knackered because you've got too much on.
I have such a bad habit of trying to do everything at once. Like I'm so bad at just wanting to kind of do a little bit of everything. But I won't put one thing down to pick up a new one. Like I will always just try and cram everything in one go. I can see that, and there are times when you sort of have to do that, but I think I manage it in those sort of chunks, and really scheduling it so that I've got a sense of what I'm working on when. I think that's how it works, although I don't, who knows. So the third book in the Firebird Chronicles series comes out at the end of November.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about it and kind of what it's been like to conclude the series?
Oh, it's very exciting to actually finish the series.
I can imagine.
I've been working on this series for so long, and with these characters, like for lots of years in different forms. So, and the third book is a definite end. It's definitely the end of the story. So it's been quite moving. Actually, when I wrote the very end of it and the last few lines, I was really choked up actually writing it. It was quite a moving thing.
Spending years with these people.
And it feels like a conclusion, and letting those characters move on as well. As well as me moving on as a writer into other stories and other sort of worlds. But I'm definitely excited for the readers to read that final book. So, and it's been interesting. So I always sort of knew that the story arc with the books, with the Firebird Chronicles, was sort of the opposite to something like Narnia, where the characters go from our real world into the fictional world.
Yeah.
And then obviously they come back at the end. I always knew it was going to be different to that with the Firebird Chronicles, that it was going to be about the fictional characters coming into our world. And I wanted to
I really like that.
I wanted to reverse that thing of we step through a doorway into a fantasy world, but I wanted to know what it was like the other way round. So I think the books are sort of about increasingly engaging with reality, with the realities of the world, and the sort of the challenges of that. That's not always easy or nice. It's something that we can struggle with. It can make us feel depressed or down, or so it's about these characters that lived in this quite happy world, moving actually into some of the difficulties of dealing with reality, but then rediscovering themselves in that reality. So yeah, I hope there's some real depth to it. So the first half of the third book is in two halves, and the first half of the book, the characters are sort of, it's an adventure story. They're running away from some monstrous characters. They're on a ship. They're crossing the sea. There's lots of quite dramatic things happen. And then the second part in the book is quite different. The second part is set in our world, and I think it has a different sort of pace to it. There's more there's more realism to it, and the characters are growing up and they're grappling with the reality of where they find themselves. So yeah, that's sort of what the book's about. And I guess it's to do with, like, it's about crossing what seems like an uncrossable boundary. That for a kid, that might be moving from primary school to secondary school and suddenly hitting the reality of this new environment, which is so different to where they've been. And that's that's tricky. Or it might be, for older people coming out of university into the world of work. And so crossing those boundaries into a new environment and maybe feeling a little bit lost in that environment and what you have to hang on to in those places.
Yeah. I definitely know what that feels like.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, well, we all do. And that's, so it's about sort of growing up, I guess, and how you make those transitions. What you hold on to from the past, what you sort of carry with you, and what you have to sort of let go of.
Like you having to try and let go of these characters.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, exactly. But all done in quite a fun way where they're running away from monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to read about running away from monsters?
Exactly. Yeah. So I love at the end of this book, there's a thing called the Nightmare Army.
Yeah.
And the Nightmare Army is full of every nightmarish character that you could think of, vampires and werewolves and banshees and giants. And, if you can think of a monstrous character, they're in the Nightmare Army. So that's quite a fun idea towards the end of the book that comes into play while Fletcher and Scoop are dealing with actually the realities of the place that they find themselves in. You've sort of got the relief of the Nightmare Army trying to get into a castle.
Yeah. So I hear you also have another writing project on the go called Bee's Witch.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me about that, or is it under wraps?
No, I can tell you about it
Cool.
a little bit because I'm still writing it. So I don't know everything about it yet. So this is sort of my next project. Having finished the Firebird Chronicles, I wanted to write something which was going to be a standalone book and was going to be set in a different sort of world, a different sort of space. The character that I'm working with is called Beatrice, and she's adopted. She's a 12-year-old girl, and she's quite unhappy with where she's moved to. The story is about a night when she runs away from home and she hides out in a place in Knaresborough, which is where I live, called Mother Shipton's Cave. So Mother Shipton was a famous Yorkshire prophetess who lived in a cave by the river. And it's a tourist attraction now. People go and sort of visit the cave. But Bee runs away from home and she climbs over the fence and she hides out in this cave, and she encounters the ghost of Mother Shipton, who helps her sort of understand who she is. She helps her to sort of think about her past and also learn how to rewrite her future or take control of her future. You know, as a prophetess, she was a woman who thought a lot about the future. So she's sort of helping Bee to come to terms with her future and where she finds herself. So it's interesting because there's some similar themes to with the Firebird Chronicles with that, in terms of, again, those transitions and adjusting to a new environment and all of those sorts of things. But I think this is probably a bit more gritty. You know, it's about an adopted girl living in a real place, and although it's got the sort of fantasy angle with her meeting Mother Shipton, it's still about her sort of real life, and it's about the experience of children who are adopted. And that partly comes from my experience, because my son is adopted, so I'm an adoptive dad, and so I'm using that experience in terms of sort of writing this story. So I'm very excited.
Really good. I'm excited to read it.
It's quite interesting because it's become a lot about mothers and daughters, which as a male author, it's quite interesting to write a story that's about mothers and daughters. But it's quite interesting that Bee and Mother Shipton find out that they have certain things in common. Because the Ursula Shipton was her name, Mother Shipton. She was actually fostered back hundreds of years ago. So they discover they have some things in common, even though they're from different centuries.
Cool. I'm excited to read it.
And I've written the first little bit of it. So I actually created the backpack. So the character Bee runs away from home and she has this backpack, and she puts stuff into this backpack. She puts her diary in it, her mobile phone, and some letters, and the sort of teddy that she always carries with her. And so I've already created her backpack, so the physical object. And the diary and the phone, and I've tested the story with some people who found the backpack and looked through it and read her diary and looked through the letters and stuff as a way of getting people to engage with the story. So that's cool. That's been quite fun.
Well, we're talking about how you're constantly busy.
Yes.
Another project that you also have on the go that I think I remember us talking about all that time ago when we spoke last, which is found fiction.
Found fiction, yes.
And that launches very soon.
So that's not my project. So that's a project run by someone else, by a guy called Steve, and I've worked with him on a literary festival I'm involved with in Leeds, and so we've basically talked about doing something together around when my book is launched. So the idea of found fiction is basically little bits of fiction get left in envelopes for people to find, and it's sort of, you can follow a sort of trail. So there's different extracts and you can find the envelopes in different places and sort of read them to piece the story together. So it's a nice idea because it gets people who are just maybe wandering past, might find an envelope and they open it and they read a little bit of a story, and then you can tweet it and you can find out about other people who've read the story or found bits of the story. It's an exciting idea, and something I wanted to try with the launch of Through the Uncrossable Boundary. Hopefully, we're still trying to work out exactly where it's going to happen, but hopefully at the beginning of December there'll be an event where people can come along and walk around and find bits of the story in random envelopes in different places.
That's really cool.
So that should be fun.
So a couple of fun questions to finish with.
Cool.
Do you have a perfect kind of writing spot? Like, what's your dream writing or reading nook?
There's cake and coffee and coffee. There's a cafe by the river near where I live, and that is probably one of my perfect writing spots.
Yeah.
I like to go out to write, and if there's somewhere where I can get some cake and coffee, that's definitely a bonus.
That's a bonus.
Yeah. So down by the river, like looking out over the water, maybe with some headphones on, so I'm listening to music as well. I think that's my perfect.
Yeah, I think
spot.
I'm the same. I can't write like at my desk. I just can't do it.
No.
I think it's because I work from home, so I'm sitting at my desk all day.
Exactly. Yeah, you're doing admin at the desk and that sort of stuff.
So there's just way too many distractions, and like my desk is right next to my bookshelves as well, so I just can't. There's way too many distractions. But when I go out, I tend to get so much more done.
That's it. I think particularly for a first draft, I get loads. I write by hand. I get loads down. And then later on when I'm editing, I'll probably do that in my office because that's on my laptop. It's a bit more workmanlike. You know, you've got something to work with. But yeah, for that first draft, I get out, go somewhere nice, walk. I like to walk and think and then sit and write. Yeah.
Well, I'm planning on doing NaNoWriMo in November.
Brilliant. That'd be fun.
And I feel like I'm going to spend so much time out the house because I'm just not going to get anything done sitting at my desk. So I'm going to have to try and find a really good spot for me to just go and park myself each day to try and get loads of writing done throughout the month.
Yeah, it makes it more fun as well. It motivates you to think, I'm going to go out, get some air. You sort of see other people around, but you're doing your thing. And I feel like when you're out, you can't just sit there and do nothing because you've taken a paper and pen. So you feel like you should be writing, which is good motivation.
And there's also nothing to get distracted by.
Exactly.
Like I feel like I can't write on my PC because there's just too many things on there. Like I can just open the internet and I'll just randomly start scrolling through Twitter or something pointless.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think I need to find a good place to go and write for the next month. Yeah,
you do. Somewhere by a river. I recommend water.
Yeah, cool.
If you can
I'll
find
try and
somewhere.
Find one.
Excellent.
I live in a small city that's quite urban, so it might be difficult. Like the rivers that there are pretty brown and gross. So...
A puddle somewhere by a puddle. Yeah.
So I'll try my best.
Yeah. Okay. You'll have to let me know how you get on.
Yeah, I will. So I've asked a couple of people this now, and I've kind of got completely mixed responses.
Cool.
Whether they either hate the question or they know the answer straight away.
Go on then.
If you could only pick 3 books to read for the rest of your life, and you can read them as many times as you want, but only 3, what would you pick?
All right, that is a really hard question, and I'm not sure I have an answer. I've had a couple of people where they've kind of answered it instantly and they've known straight away, but I've also just had a lot of groans and why are you asking me this question? I mean, I can tell you what books I love, but actually if you say I've got to live with just those books for the rest of my life, I'm not sure because there's something nice about about difference and diversity. But if I was going to pick sort of favorite books, I might pick things like Philip Pullman's Dark Materials. Anything, but maybe I'd pick a book like I read Umberto Eco's book called Foucault's Pendulum, which is about it's quite a dense book, and it's about a publisher who basically gets caught up in a story and basically gets swept into this story, and it's sort of about writing and publishing and the idea that as a publisher you're usually outside of the story. And maybe I'd take something like that I didn't quite understand. Or I didn't get all of it. Like there were bits that I loved, so that I could like keep reading it again and again and get different things from it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Maybe. So I need to find more books like that, basically. Things I don't understand.
Ones that are different every time you read them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That sounds good. I don't know if that's just thick books. I'm sure there's plenty of books that are like that. So so that's 2 anyway. Well, I've sort of had Philip Pullman's Dark Materials, which is 3 books anyway, but I'm putting them together. And then
that's fine. I allow that.
The Umberto Eco one, and then maybe I need to go for something like really simple. But that has, you know, maybe like Alice in Wonderland or something, you know, that has some philosophy in there, but is quite a simple kids book as well. Mm-hmm. Maybe, I don't know.
I feel like I'd have to pick one that, you know, like choose your own adventure books.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to pick one of those, because then it's almost like you're reading loads of different stories, but it's one book. You can kind of cheat a little bit.
I like that. I've got a game which is a bit like that. It's a Sherlock Holmes game, and I had it when I was a teenager, and I've always loved it. And it's got like it's got a map of London, and it's got a little book with loads of newspaper articles in, and it's got a telephone directory, and it's got a book of clues, and basically you sort of read the opening to the case, and then you can sort of think, oh, I'd like to speak to this person, and you look them up in the telephone directory and find out where they live, and then go to that in the clue book. Or you might look on the map and say, I want to visit this pub, and you find out what number it is, and then you go to the clue book. So that's quite like that, because
that's really cool.
There's lots of different cases that you can do, so that would keep that'd keep me going quite a while, I think. Yeah, I'll go for that. I'll have that then. That sounds good.
Nice. Yes, I like it. So I think we've come to the end. I've run out of questions to ask.
Excellent. Well, that's been fun.
This time has just flown.
I know. So much to talk about.
I know. We'll have to. We'll need to catch up sooner than in about 2 years' time.
We will. Yes. Maybe when Bee's Witch is like more developed.
Yeah.
Another chat about that.
Yes, that sounds good.
But yeah, it would be good. Yeah. No more 2 years.
No. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. You can find all of the information from this episode, including all of the things that we talked about and a little bit about today's guest, in the show notes. And they'll be at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and the links for those will also be in the show notes. And finally, if you want to chat, or you've just got a burning question you want to ask about this episode or any of the others, you can pop me an email at podcast@wonderfullybookish.co.uk. See you next time.